All right, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So today, inshallah, we're going to be talking about Muslim brotherhood. It's a really important topic, and I hope you could see the screen in front of you because this topic is so sensitive that we just often think of it as if it's just a spiritual topic and it has nothing really of much of importance. It's just trying to build in some kind of romantic talk, which is really not true. Because when we're talking about Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic Brotherhood, I'm not talking about the Islamic Brotherhood, the organization here, but when we're talking about Muslim Brotherhood, it actually is that bond that builds within the Muslim society. And this bond, as human beings, we have to have this relationship with one another. We have to we we live in schools, we live in groups, we can't live separated. The second we live separated, we can actually die. And which is why one of the worst kinds of torture that anyone can do, or that prisons do, is the confinement, the that personal and that those cells and that personal confinement that actually makes it the worst torture that you could actually put a person in. And the main reason to it is because we cannot live as separate human beings. We can't live out as individuals. We always need a companion next to us. And in this world, there are so many different things that are taking us left and right. And there's so many hard situations, and especially with our deen. We can't live without having that connection with the other people, the other people that are on the same bond, at least with us, in order to give us that support. And this is really important to say, because the second that we forget about that, that's when we would feel that we are all of a sudden tortured on the inside, and we're then prone to fitna, which is why the Prophet ﷺ actually said that giving the example, very similitude in that similitude, in where he said that the ishat, or that the ebb, or the foxes, or the the animals, when they would see a lonesome a lonesome sheep, they would actually go and prey on that sheep that was wandering alone. And this is exactly the same thing when we're talking about, as Muslims, shaitan will come to you when you're actually separate and on your own, rather than within the community. So when we look at innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the believers are actually brethren to one another, this is actually telling us, and here's, I'm trying as much as I can. Unfortunately, my laptop is failing on me. Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa. This is telling us that when there is a bond, that the bond is supposed to be based on faith. And this is actually taking us into a very important direction, and where what we need to, oh, it's not allowing me to annotate either. What we need to always remember is, when we have a bond, there is a very important bond, which is what is it based on? What is the bond based on? Is the bond based on our interests? Is the bond based on the goals that we're having in life? What is the bond based on? Or is the bond based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Or is the bond based on materialistic things? Which is why in Islam, the bond is supposed to be based on the deen first. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, that the first bond, and what makes the main bond, what makes us the adhesive within the bond, within the Muslim community, within the believers, is really their iman. Innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, that verily the believers are brethren to one another. And which is why the Prophet ﷺ was denouncing, or was taking was pushing away every type of a bond that is based on materialism. And even if we're talking about the bond in where the pagan Arab were living in, which was based on blood, the blood relations, which is why the Prophet ﷺ actually says, ألا لا فضل لعربي على أعجمي على عجمي ولا لعجمي على عربي ولا أحمر على أسود ولا أسود على أحمر إلا بالتقوى. Which is why the Prophet ﷺ was then redefining brotherhood in where he said there is no preference from a Arabi, from a Arab person over a non-Arab person, or a non-Arab over a Arabi person, or a red person, which is a different color that they would consider that there are people that are colored red, or aswad, or over a black person, or a black person over a red person. إلا بالتقوى. This is talking about the complexion, because within different races, within our human beings, in order for us to feel that we are over or better than somebody else, we tend to find different reasons how to make ourselves seem better. Sometimes based on money, sometimes based on tribe, some other times based on complexion. And the list goes on and how we want to make ourselves seem somehow deserving an advantage, a special advantage. And most of the times we want to make that advantage somehow an advantage that is not based on our effort, and not really based on the inside, but based on the outside. And therefore we would belittle one another, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says in the end that when we're talking about that closeness, وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ, the whole reason to this bond is basically وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتُ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ يَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَيُطِيعُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ أُولَئِكَ سَيَرْحَمُهُمُ اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزِيزٌ حَكِيمٌ. When we look at this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here emphasizing that the believing men and the believing women are really the ones to support one another. The word awliya, I want you to look at this one. The word awliya can be authority, can also be support, and can also be leadership. So it's authority in leadership, and can also be support, can also be this bond in where we're advising one another, and which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing believing men and believing women. They are a bond, they are an authority to one another. They have one main goal, one main purpose, one direction, in where what do they do? يأمرون بالمعروف. They order for what is good and they forbid what is wrong. ويقيمون الصلاة. And the bond that makes them in that way, in where they would order for what is good and forbid what is wrong. So why did it actually start with that? Because remember that acronym that I always use, in where when we're talking about any type of an Islamic lens to see the world through, we go based on the DNAIM to make the story in an acronym: your deen, the nafs, the aql, the ird, the mal. In translation, the deen is the spirituality, or the deen, which is the religion itself; the nafs, the lives; the aql, the mind, the or intellect; the ird, the family and the chastity; and finally the wealth. Whenever we want to scrutinize anything in Islam, this is the order that you're going to scrutinize them through, because this is the legal maxim in Islam. It always goes in this category and considers those as priority one, priority two, priority three. Now, looking at that and reading it through that lens, you could see that the first bond that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered is really al-Iman. And that's why the ayah emphasized, didn't say al-Muslimun, but it said the believing men and the believing women. In other words, it's not an issue of male or female here, but it's an issue of faith here, where the believing men and the believing women, again, rejecting that division. First it was rejecting the division based on color or based on race, and then it was rejecting the differences based on the sex, or believing men and believing women believing men and believing women, they're in the end is that it's all based on iman. بعضهم أولياء بعض. They would support one another based on what? يأمرون بالمعروف. There's a foundation to recognize the right and wrong, the foundation to recognize what makes my vision different from any other person's vision. The vision that it is based on is really the vision where we're able to define right and wrong, where we're able to define justice from injustice. It starts, yes, with faith, but then the application of it is really, or the implication of that is really in how we define right and wrong, and how we define the world around us, in where, how do we put that on ground? Well, we put it on ground by ordering for what is good and forbidding what is evil in practice. Then we go into a different type of, again, we're still in the bond, the first bond of deen, which is still in the spirituality part. Yuqimuna salah. In the spirituality, not only do they have the vision in place where they would order for what is right and what is wrong based on the Quran and Sunnah, based on the belief. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them mu'mineen and mu'minat. Now, but they would also have the bond between them and the Lord Almighty, the bond between them and the Lord Almighty, where they would perform the salah and perform the zakah, in where they have a special connection between themselves, them, and the Lord Almighty as individuals and also as a group. يقيمون الصلاة, perform the salah. And also when it comes to money, because we as human beings, we consider money as a way in order to bring us survival, in order to bring us all the different things that we might need. And then here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taking one very important thing of us, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to give up on the money and to actually focus on the principle more than the provisions that we might find in life, or the good things that we might find in life. And the other part, but remember, when we're talking about deen and nafs and aql and ard, we're still focusing on that deen right there, because you cannot separate faith in your Lord Almighty from how you would apply the relationship between you and the Lord Almighty by obeying the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now here, أولئك سيرحمهم الله. How does the bond, how is the Muslim Brotherhood bond going to affect our hearts and our relationship with one another? أولئك سيرحمهم الله. In where the start of it and how it begins is really in where the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be laid on them. Once the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be laid on them, the reflection is that it will be also spread on the rest of the mu'mineen. Why? Because it actually starts with you having that bond. And when we look at the main bond, we could see that in another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Again, we're still in the category of deen, in where you want to support one another. This is the base. This is the base. But then there is, how do we actually support one another? There is the lens. There is the lens that you start with. The the lens that you start with to see the world around you based on deen first, but then with one another, there's always supposed to be another base, and that is, sorry, not another base, but there's always supposed to be stemmed and traces from that base, which is ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa, support one another with bir and taqwa. What is the difference between bir and taqwa? Il-bir is different than taqwa, because il-bir is a level in where you would give in, not based on justice. There's something better than justice in Islam, which is al-ihsan, which is il-bir, because justice is actually trying to be equal with another person, but bir is when you give in, even though it is actually not based on justice. And even though you're not giving in based on how much they deserve, but you are giving in, you're giving in based on the principle and the level that you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put you in. And that is bir. Taqwa is more related that we're trying to seek equity. We're trying to seek a level of being on the same level here. So we're here trying to be equal in a sense where you give me this much, I give you this much. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is pushing the believers, just like in the ayah, إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان. العدل is number is really where the taqwa is in, and the ihsan is really similar to that bir. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان. الإحسان is actually a higher level. And here تعاونوا على البر والتقوى. It's like for a believer, you go farther. You go farther than just trying to be equal and just trying to seek that justice. You go farther in where you give in to seek that coming in, to seek the response from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. And do not support one another on ithim. Al-ithim is transgression. Al-udwan is when somebody would not only transgress, but they would also oppress one another. What is the difference between transgression and oppression? So in ithm, when you're going beyond the levels or going beyond the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set. Al-udwan is going beyond not only the limits on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you're going beyond the limit in the human right, or the Muslim right, or the brotherhood right. You're going beyond in where you're attacking the people. So this is transgressing the limit from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set, and this is transgressing the limit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or is set against has set for the safety of those humans in the end. So now based on that, you could see then it takes us to level 2, which is we just talked about the deen. Now we go into the nafs, in protecting the Muslim lives, in protecting our lives, in protecting one another, which is why the Prophet ﷺ, as you can see in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Unsur akhaka zaliman aw mazluman." Unsur, victory your brother, victory your Muslim brother, whether they were oppressed or whether they are oppressors, whether they're oppressors or whether they're oppressed. So this, you might say, how can we, which is exactly the same question that the Prophet ﷺ was asked. We could victory him when he's oppressed. How do we victory him when he's an oppressor? He said, you would prevent him and prohibit him and stop him from oppressing others. And this is how you would want to protect your Muslim brother or Muslim sister's life, by making sure that they are actually being just. They are actually doing the right thing, because in the end, what you do is going to determine a lot of what is coming at you. What you do and what you present is going to determine a lot of what's coming at you and a lot of your future. That's why if we want to study somebody's future, we would look at their past, because it's simple. Even when we look at nature, we could see that it's all within those laws of physics, in where you throw a ball in one section towards one end and it will come back to you in the same way, in the same direction, probably even the same momentum, but then it slows down with time. And that's the same thing. What you present and what you had presented is really, and what your Muslim brother presented is really what you want to help them in their future. So a lot of times we might look at, how do I support their nafs? What do I actually do? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had actually set the limits, and where prevent from any type of transgression towards other Muslims as well. The Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ, in khutbah al-wada', which is the last farewell khutbah, the Prophet ﷺ set those limits. And he says, أَلَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ دِمَاءَكُمْ وَأَمْوَالَكُمْ كَحُرْمَةِ يَوْمِكُمْ هَذَا في بلدكم هذا في شهركم هذا. The Prophet ﷺ had set the limit and actually said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had prohibited the killing of one another. In other words, your blood, your lives are actually haram to transgress. Meaning what? Meaning to kill one another is actually haram. And same thing goes from speaking about the Muslim lives. And the word dima'akum means blood, but it is a metaphor to mean life. In other words, protecting the Muslim life is actually the second right that a Muslim must protect. The first one was deen, the second one was their life. And wa amwalakum, and your wealth and your property is something that you have to protect for your Muslim brother, and you cannot transgress the limit. كحرمة يومكم هذا. It is exactly as holy, it is exactly as holy as the day that the Prophet ﷺ was in, which is here during khutbah al-wada', which is during al-khutbah, in where it is that day where the Prophet ﷺ had even said about the prophecy that there told that said about the prophecy that he لعلي لا ألقاكم بعد عامكم هذا. I may not see you again after this year. And this was during the Hajjat al-Wada'. Now, same thing, it's not just holy, it's not, in other words, the Prophet ﷺ was emphasizing here the exact same rules, the exact same holiness of one Muslim's life or a person's property is exactly as holy and as to be protected and as to be considered as a sacred matter, just as when we're talking about Mecca, or just when we're talking about the Yawm Arafah. It is exactly like those days and those places. They are as sacred. Now, when we speak about the sacredness of the Muslim life, we're also talking about how the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ actually says, Al-Muslim wa akhul Muslim la yadlimuhu wa la yakhdhuluhu wa la yahqiruhu ولا يحقره. Now, when we look at this, the Prophet ﷺ again defining. So now we move from deen to the nafs. Then it goes in detail. How do you actually preserve the nafs? By your talking about other things to even support mental health, in where this is taking us to category 3 and category 4 in here, which is preserving the mental health. Remember, deen, nafs, aql, the deen, the life, the mind, and also the family and the chastity within the Muslim community. Right here to preserve the second, the third, and the fourth, and the fifth support that a Muslim must give to the other Muslim. In other words, these are the Muslim brother and the Muslim sister's rights, in where the Prophet ﷺ says the Muslim is actually a brethren to another Muslim. لا يظلمه, does not oppress him. ولا يخذله, and does not betray him. ولا يحقره. I want you to look at ولا يحقره, because it is emphasizing a very important thing. Does not condescend him, does not belittle him. Why does not belittle or condescend him? Because at the end of the day, that affects the mental health of that person. When you're putting them down, you're making them feel like you are over them and they are nothing. And that betrayal, or that type of relationship, when you're belittling another Muslim, what does it affect? Well, the Prophet ﷺ actually emphasizes what affects, and he says, التقوى ها هنا ويشير إلى صدره 3 مرات. Taqwa is in here, it is in the heart, and he would point to the heart 3 times. Why? Because don't consider that you are better than anybody by thinking that I've got the money, I've got the degrees, I've got PhDs, and I've got a prestigious position in such and such company, or etc. Because it's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to look at. That's not what's gonna lead you to Jannah. What will lead you to Jannah is really what is inside. It is really the heart. And the Prophet ﷺ said, بحسب امرئ من الشر أن يحقر أخاه المسلم كل المسلم على المسلم حرام دمه وماله وعرضه. Now let's look at this hadith again. It says بحسب امرئ من الشر. Meaning like it is enough. Like it's kind of like saying, there's a limit. It is enough to do a major evil thing that a person will belittle another Muslim. Belittle another Muslim. Why? Because the second they belittle another Muslim, they have lost their taqwa by considering that they are the center, and that this Muslim brother or sister are really nothing, and they are somehow above them. And then they will see that they have completed what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of them. And they are, even though they're actually on the threshold of hellfire, when they may not realize it. كل المسلم على المسلم حرام. Again, emphasizing the deen, the nafs, the aql, the ard, the mal, right there. Every Muslim, على المسلم حرام. In other words, a relationship between a Muslim and another Muslim is sacred. دمه, his life. دمه means his blood, but this is a metaphor to mean his life and his wealth and even his chastity, even his reputation. Remember, emphasizing right here the life, the wealth, and even the chastity, or the person's reputation, exactly in the same order in where we're talking about the life, the wealth, and also the chastity of one person. The Prophet, in order to again take us back, we're going back and forth between the deen, the nafs, the aql, the mal. And here it actually continues. How do you bring about that mental health support? You bring the mental health support. The Prophet in the hadith, when we look at the word, it says fi sahihain, that would mean Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari. That from the hadith that was narrated by Nu'man ibn Bashir, that he said that the Prophet said in the hadith, مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاطفهم مثل الجسد إذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحمى. What is this hadith saying? That the Prophet ﷺ had given an example. In other words, gave in that comparison for the believers, for the Muslimin, to see, well, what is the bond really like? It's giving that similitude. What does the bond really look like when we're talking about a Muslim bond? The Prophet ﷺ said that the tafi tawadduhim, in where the way that they relate with one another, in the way, the love they would have for one another, the mercy that they would have for one another, and ta'atufihim, the emotions and the sympathy and empathy that they would have for one another, is exactly like one body. If one of the bodies would complain of illness, in other words, if any part of the body would feel pain, the rest of the body would feel the pain and would actually feel that vibration of that ailment, and it will stay bisahri wal humma, and it would actually, the rest of the body would react to that pain by getting a fever. In other words, with the symptoms, all of it is really because of one area, but the symptom is really seen on the rest of the body. The rest of the body is really telling us that there is one place that is feeling pain. What does that what does that comparison mean? In where, when one part of the Muslim community is feeling the pain, we don't distance ourselves from them, but we would actually show that we are part of the ones to support, to uplift the pain, whatever it takes. And which is why the Prophet ﷺ, in another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, from the hadith that was narrated by Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and again here you could see Bukhari and Muslim, in where it is narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, to tell us that is actually one of the most authentic levels of hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ actually says, al-mu'minu lil-mu'min kal-bunyan yashuddu ba'duhu ba'da, that a believer to another believer is exactly like one building, is exactly like one whole fortress, in where it will support and fortify one another by giving that compression, by giving that support, and they would be so connected with one another. And when we're speaking about that, remember the Prophet ﷺ, was giving very many times, that what does it mean to support one another? How do we support one another? And what does it mean to give that mental health? That mental health. The Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith again narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet, that Jarila actually said, Jarir ibn Abdullah al-Bajli, that he had said, بايعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم على إقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة والنصح لكل مسلم. Here's a very important alliance with the Prophet ﷺ. Jarir ibn Abdullah was known to be in a very tall, very huge in body. And the Prophet ﷺ actually said about Jarir ibn Abdullah, I'll tell you this story I love very much. So the Prophet ﷺ was giving the khutbah, and during the khutbah, the Prophet ﷺ said, there a man is going to come in that has alayhi mishatu malak. He has a mishatu malak, the appearance of an angel. Jarir ibn Abdullah comes in and sits. But Jarir didn't know what was said about him. Jarir doesn't know what was said about him. So when he sits, everyone is staring at him. Everyone is looking at him, but he doesn't really know why everyone is staring. So he asked the person next to him, did he say anything about me? I was like, what is wrong? Why is everybody staring at me? So the Sahabi next to him said that the Prophet ﷺ said that you have an appearance of an angel, and that kept him always feeling the warmth, always feeling the happiness, that he looks like an angel. And remember, he was the tallest, if probably the tallest Sahabi, and the biggest in size of Sahaba. What does he say? He says, Bayatu Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, means I had done the il-bay'ah. Il-bay'ah is like alliance, or the support, and ala iqam salah. What was he supporting, or what was he doing that alliance, that political alliance with the Prophet ﷺ, that I would perform salah, and that I would give zakah, وَالنُّصْحِ لِكُلِّ Muslim. The word وَالنُّصْحِ لِكُلِّ Muslim actually means to give an advice for every single Muslim. It doesn't mean that you're going to advise every single Muslim, but it means that you will be there to support the Muslim mentally by helping them take the right decisions and make the right decisions for the sake of their deen and for the sake of their dunya. Again, you're advising the Muslims by giving them the right thing that is for their deen and for their dunya, which is one nushi kulli Muslim, to be there as a Muslim bond. You're not just concerned about yourself, but you're giving them the advice within the Muslim community, in order to give them a good, healthy life in the akhirah, and also in the dunya, which is very similar to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually said in Surah Al-Asr, wal asri innal insana lafi khusr. By al-asr, by the time of al-asr, by the time which is right before evening, after afternoon. Innal insana lafi khusr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Verily, man is sure to be a loser, except إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, except those that believe and do what is righteous, and وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. I want you to look at وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ here. Tawasaw would mean that they would advise one another. They would support one another, bilhaq, based on truth. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and they would advise one another and support one another with patience. Now, these two things are really important because we may know truth and sometimes not necessarily do it, which is where Muslim bond comes in order to remind and help us have not only a divine order, but even a Muslim order where we would advise the sister, advise the brother, and tell them, listen, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala such and such. And speaking to the heart is extremely important before we make this a personal argument. Speak to the heart. You know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders for salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what are you going to do when you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? As an example. And this is taking us that the first connection that you want to connect with is really on haqq, on truth. And then you can know the truth, but sometimes you can weaken. A sister might tell you, I would really like to buy a home, but then riba is my cheapest option. And you would say, sister, I know it might sound good and I know it feels good to have a beautiful home, but tawasaw sabr, you would tell her, be patient. I know it looks prestigious to have a home and it looks cheaper to get it from riba than actually get it through an Islamic means, etc. But you have to be patient. This is not our life here in the dunya. So now you give that sister, that bond in order to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to stay holding on truth, to stay holding on with the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you let her or him be in support and in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at the same time, you give them that patience, the ability to hold in even when the person is feeling weakened because of so many different things in the society. The Prophet ﷺ, and this is the main hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, when he talked about the Muslim brother's rights, he said, حق المسلم على المسلم ست. Haqqul Muslim, the rights of a Muslim over another Muslim, is in 6 matters. One, they asked, what are they, O Prophet of Allah? He says, قال إذا لقيته فسلم عليه. When you see him, then start with Assalamu alaikum. Start with Assalamu alaikum. And if he would invite you, you would accept that invitation. You would be humble to accept the invitation and not consider them as less than you and therefore not at your level. So why should you come? وَإِذَا اسْتَنصَحَكَ فَانصَحْ لَهُ. And if you would ask for an advice, then give him an advice with, of course, sincerity. And if they would عطس فحمد الله فشمت. And if he would sneeze, you would say يرحمك الله. You would say, and he would say, Alhamdulillah, you would say, Yarhamukallah. And if he would get sick, you will visit him. وَإِذَا مَاتَ وَإِن And if he would die, you would actually follow the janazah. You would be there. In other words, from life till death, from life till death, you will be there to support that Muslim brother or sister. Now, this is really important to mention because it's not just talking about what you give. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ actually goes into a higher level and says, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. You would not be considered a believer unless you love for your Muslim brother what you love for yourself. And where the Prophet ﷺ actually says to even a higher level, not only you love for your Muslim brother what you love for yourself, but the Prophet ﷺ actually says in a hadith that was narrated by Muslim that the Prophet ﷺ says, لا تدخلون الجنة حتى تؤمنوا. You cannot enter Jannah until you believe, and you will not believe until you love one another. أولا أدلكم على شيء إذا فعلتموه تحاببتم أفشوا السلام بينكم. Well, should I not show you off to something that if you were to do it, you would love one another? أفشوا السلام بينكم. Spread السلام, spread peace amongst you. And this is going into, how do I actually bring in the love? How do I actually bring in the bond? Which is another way where the Prophet ﷺ was telling us, well, spread the peace, spread not only words and saying Assalamu alaikum, but also actions of peace. When we speak about actions of peace, when we speak about actions of peace, we're also talking about what makes an action of peace. We could see that the Prophet ﷺ narrated in a hadith that was in Sahih Muslim from Safwan ibn Abdullah, that the Prophet ﷺ actually says, دعوة المرء المسلم لأخيه بظهر الغيب مستجابة. So what does it mean? That, well, it isn't that you just love for your Muslim brother, but in practice, it isn't that you just spread peace by saying Assalamu alaikum. In practice, it actually means that you even do a dua, because the dua that a Muslim would give for his Muslim brother without them being present is answered. And from with every single dua that they actually do, there's actually an angel that is there present. And then the angel would say, Ameen. The angel would say, Oh Allah, answer the prayer. Look at that prayer, that dua that is blessed here. Walaka bimithl, and you would get the same. Now, this is not only for the Muslim brothers that are living amongst you, but this is actually true even for those that came before us, in where the Muslim bond, the Muslim connection, the Muslim brotherhood is not for the person that you know or you recognize, but it is even for the past believers, in where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. I want you to look at this ayah, وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ, and those that come after them, after the Muslims that are present today. يقولون ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا. What do they say? Well, they say, Oh Lord Almighty, forgive us and forgive our Muslim brothers and Muslim brothers that had preceded us in faith. And ولا تجعل, and do not make any animosity in our hearts towards those that believe. ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. O Lord Almighty, you are most, the word Ra'uf is like most merciful, and well, Ra'uf is also most affectionate and most merciful. This is in order for us. Look at this dua in where we're making the dua through the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, most affectionate and most merciful. And we're also saying, Ya Allah, don't make any animosity towards us and the believers. Don't let there be any animosity towards us and the believing men and the believing women, because that animosity will wipe away a lot of your iman without you realizing. When it wipes away that iman, it takes away your connection between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we look at the blessing, remember when we talked about the malaika and the blessing, and that we are connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by also connecting with the malaika and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that the malaika bless the relationship between us, and between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The malaika's presence actually enhances the relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not just the malaika, but this is also telling us that even a Muslim brother or a Muslim sister, they too are actually part of what makes a blessed relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is exactly the same thing. And where that blessing, or in order to get the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in order to get that connection between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a Muslim brother, a Muslim brother is also part of what gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and brings that bond between you and the Muslim brother or Muslim sister, actually gets you closer, which is why the hadith was actually talking about your dua will be answered if you make the dua for another Muslim when they're not even present. In other words, it's a sincere one, and the malaika will say Ameen, and you will get also the same. What is this telling us? That the bond between you and a Muslim brother is actually a bond that is going to get you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With the same exact idea, we could see that the Prophet ﷺ, as in the hadith again narrated in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, based on Abdullah ibn Umar, that he actually said, من كان في حاجة أخيه كان الله في حاجته ومن فرج عن مسلم كربة فرج الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة من كرب يوم القيامة ومن ستر مسلما ستره الله يوم القيامة. I want you to look at this hadith. من كان في حاجة أخيه, whoever was there for the need of another Muslim brother, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be there for their needs. And who would ever uplift a calamity over another Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would uplift and would uplift a calamity on that Muslim on Judgment Day. In other words, there's so many calamities on Judgment Day. The price that you pay now, it will be an investment in the akhirah. The price that you give and that help that you would give your Muslim brother and sister in this dunya is actually going to be the investment that will come back to you in the dunya and even in the akhirah. Not only in the akhirah, which is why you could see here min kurabati yawm al-qiyamah, from the calamities of yawm al-qiyamah, but here in the dunya, كان الله في حاجة كان الله في حاجته, that in the end, man كان في حاجته دي أخيه كان الله في حاجته, that whoever was for the need of their Muslim brother or sister, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be for their needs, will be covering your needs. In other words, if you're feeling that things are closing up on you, if you're feeling that things are closing up on you, well, help your Muslim brother or sister, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be there to actually give you the support, whether it was financial support, or whether it was moral support, or whether it was the support that you probably need to give an advice. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give that to you. It will come back to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's really a lot to say. Um, uh, but we'll just here we'll end inshallah, and in the end is that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us believing brothers and sisters, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that will live up to being being the Muslims that advise one another and that support one another, especially in the times that we're in where when you would support one another, especially on the deen, you will be there seen as as um, as being judgmental, and then it all of a sudden goes into a different direction. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us better than what others think of us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those that live up to the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and see what is true as true and what is evil as evil. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us part of those that will enhance the Muslim bond and bring the Muslim ummah back to haqq, and make us from those that follow haqq and not just speak of it. And Ya Allah, we ask you to make us from those that see and do what is haqq and are able to get the will to do haqq, because in the end we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala min al-ajzi wal-kasal, from al-ajz, which is feeling hopeless to be able to, well, helpless to be able to do anything, and where our own bodies fail on us, or the support that surrounds us fails on us, and sometimes we have all the power, but then we don't have the willpower. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the willpower and give us the power to do what is right, and make us from those that will support one another. Yes, we are here, via Zoom, but the malaika, inshallah, are present to say, وَلَنَا بِمِثْلِ, and to tell us all that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would give us all the same, to give us that power, and to give us that support, and to give us that energy to do what is right. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I don't know how to see what the questions are, but oh, no questions at all. All right. So if anybody wants to say something, so I'm not sure where, um, you know, sorry you guys, but the laptop really failed on me. I'm confused. Okay. All right. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Jazakumullah khairan for attending.